Welcome back to the Project House, everybody. I'm Jim V. Brock. In today's episode, we're going to fix this damaged piece of drywall and a settling crack. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to the Project House. Our project today is really a simple project, and it's a common project. Accidents happen, and sometimes you end up with damaged drywall. And today we're going to fix this. This is a relatively large hole, but you can have a small hole, whatever. And the same way we're going to fix it works for all applications for it. Even if it's a great big hole, the same thing's going to happen. And what we're going to do is called a butterfly patch. And simply we're going to cut this out. We're going to put a matching piece of drywall over top of it and repair it. One of the things that we have to deal with ahead of that, though, is there's a very slight texture to this wall. Sometimes they call it orange peel, but what I call orange peel is a little heavier texture than what this is. There's just a really slight texture here. So if you have a smooth wall, you won't have to do some of the steps that we're going to do today. But if you have a texture on here, you got to get this texture off of there first, because you don't want to build your mud up on top of the texture. When we're done, we don't want to be able to see that this wall was patched. So if you just put your new mud on top of the existing texture, you're going to be building that up, and it's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker, and you're going to be able to see this repair. A professional repair, you're not going to be able to see at all. So the first thing we need to do is get this off. We're going to sand this off with a pad sander here in a minute. But I want you to wear a mask when you're doing this. I'm going to put one on in just a second. Primarily because if the house was built before 1978, there will be remnants of lead-based paint probably on this wall or this plaster. Lead-based paint has been linked to all kinds of health issues. So we want you to work safe and wear a mask when you're sanding this off. Now, this particular house was built in the 1990s, so we really don't have the lead-based paint issue to deal with, but we just don't want to inhale those particulates. So I'm going to put a mask on, and we're going to grind this off and get ready to start our patch. Okay, so I've got this pretty smooth here, and I'm ready to move on. So what I've done is this is just a piece of cardboard that's a little bit larger than the hole, and I want to use a template here because I need to have what I cut out of here the same as what I cut out over there on the scrap drywall piece. So I'm just going to have a piece that's slightly larger than the hole, and by that I want to feel around on my hole and make sure that it's solid on the back, because it could just be paper here, and I want to make sure that I get all the way back to where I have good drywall. So that's what I've done with this. I'm just going to put this on here, and I'm going to draw a line that I can see to cut when I cut this out. Okay, I used my template there to mark my area that I'm going to cut out. Now, I could take a good sharp drywall knife and follow along there and take that out. If you happen to have a rotary tool, such as this, then you can cut it out with that. You can use any kind of a jigsaw or anything to cut this out, really. But I'm going to use this rotary tool because I like it and it does a nice job. So here we go. Now, obviously, before you do that, you're going to want to check and make sure there's no electrical lines or plumbing lines in behind that. So now we have a nice clean square that we can use. And we get lucky here because there's actually a stud right there to help support it. In some cases, if you have a large hole, you might want to put a piece of backing in there, which would be a board of some kind that you put in on the back. You put a screw in the top, screw in the bottom, and then you would have some backing to put this against. But no bigger than this hole is, this is going to work fine. So let's go over and cut a piece of drywall to match this hole. Okay, so what I did is I found a piece of scrap drywall that's just a little bit bigger than the template that we made. So here's the template, there's the arrow, and we put it on here. And the reason I want it a little bit bigger is because we're going to use the paper on the front of the drywall to act as the drywall tape that you would ordinarily use. You would ordinarily go like this, and you would then have all this other stuff. But with a butterfly patch, you don't have to do that. So what we're going to do is turn this over on the back, and put my template on here. And we're going to mark this out just like we did on the wall. I'll put that in there, just like this. Okay, now this time I'm going to use my drywall knife, and I'm going to simply remove all of the material except for the paper on the front. I want to leave the paper on the front. So we're going to just cut this with my knife all the way around. Okay, and instead of cutting the paper, I'm going to gently try to remove, leaving the paper on the front. Again, I'm just snapping it. I'm gently trying to leave, just peel that paper off like this. I'm going to do this on all four sides. Just like that. Now you can see my patch has the paper already on the front. So let's go see how well it's going to fit. Okay, so I've already determined that my new patch is going to fit perfectly. What I like to do then is just kind of bevel this edge just a little bit and get any of that loose paper back down to where it's tight, because it's going to stick up and cause you some problems. So I just put a little bevel on there just to make that a little bit easier to keep this nice and flat, because the whole thing is about keeping it flat. So what I have here is just regular drywall mud compound, straight out of the box. I haven't watered it down, haven't done anything. And from this point, it's just like doing any drywall seam. We're going to take our mud and we're going to put a liberal amount of it all the way around our repair joint, like this, all the way out there. Remember, we're going to squeeze it out here in just a minute, but you want it up all the way around, because this is the glue that holds the tape, or in this case, the paper, in place. If your patch happens to be a little loose in the hole, you can take drywall mud and put around the edge of your deal to fill that in. This patch happens to fit really, really well. So I'm going to try this. We ain't got enough hands here, but we're going to try. We're going to put our patch in there, just like so. And we're going to smooth this out. I got it. I'm going to smooth this out, and then I'm going to take my knife, and again, just like you would with any other joint, you're going to just smooth this out. You're going to squeeze the excess joint compound out from under the tape, just like this. Okay, and so now you can see how your patch is going to fit in there beautifully. So we're going to come out and just get our excess mud away. Again, try not to smear it too far out into the field, because we have that texture we got to deal with. And so we're just going to smooth out any wrinkles that may be in that paper, just like this. Okay, so you can see now how smooth this is going to be. This is why it was important that we took the texture off first, because we need the patch to lay back in there. We're going to build up around it, and then the texture will be added a little bit later. So everything looks like it's going to work here. I'm going to let that dry overnight, and tomorrow we're going to put our second coat on there, and then later in the day we'll put a third coat on, texture it, and we'll be able to primer it and paint it. So be back with you in just a second. It's the next day, and we've allowed the mud to dry completely around our patch. It's done a really good job. Now, the only thing I would do different than you would do normally for just a regular tape joint is, remember, we're trying to keep our work area as small as possible due to the texturing on this. So what I want to do is just take my 80 grit sanding block. I'm just going to come along here and smooth out my edges so that I don't have to have additional workspace out into this textured area. So I'm just going to kind of smooth this up along here and take any ridges off of the paper that I might have, because I don't want, again, it's about keeping this as thin as possible. So I've got that done, and now I'm going to take my regular mud. Again, I haven't watered it down yet, still using the 4-inch knife, and I'm going to go along here, and I'm just going to smooth this in just to help hide that tape joint. And we're, again, less is more at this point. Our first coat was relatively liberal, and with each coat we go or do after the fact is going to be less and less. As a matter of fact, the next coat I do, I'm going to water this down, and this will probably be done and ready to paint later today. So it's first thing in the morning here at the job site, and I'm just bringing that edge in to hide the hide that paper mark or where the tape would ordinarily be. So we're just smoothing this out. And again, you can tell I'm not having hardly any mud at all up on the paper, because I'm just really trying to keep this as thin as possible coming around here. This patch is doing great. Absolutely doing great. Okay, now I'm going to let that be. As thin as this is, this will dry probably in an hour or less, and I'll be able to come back and recoat this again. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sand any imperfections off of it. Then I'm going to water this down, put my last coat on there. Later today, we'll be able to texture this and then finally paint it. So we'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, we're at the end of the second day. There's a total of 3 coats of mud on our patch. And I've kind of sanded this off to blend it out into the patch. What I want to do is just take a straight edge and check and see if I got high spots or low spots. And it's actually laying in there pretty good. So I think I'm close enough to where I want to go ahead and texture this. Now, to tell if you got high spots or low spots, if you have a high spot, then your blade's going to rock like this as you put it on the wall. If you got a low spot, you'll be able to see light in between the blade and the wall. And if you got a low spot or something, you want to fill that in. If you have a high spot, you want to sand it off. So I just took a regular drywall sanding block and I went around the edge and I got this all cleaned up. I'm satisfied with my patch. So the thing that I've got to do now, if you had smooth walls, you're done. All you have to do is primer this before you paint it, and then you have to paint the whole wall. If you don't do that, you'll be able to see a different sheen in this patch area, and you'll be able to see the patch. You don't want that. Now, as we talked about in the beginning, what makes this patch hard is the fact that I got this really light texturing on the wall that I have to mimic. So what I'm going to do is take some drywall mud and mix it down. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, so what I have is my drywall mixing tub. I got a 4-inch blade, and I have some regular drywall mud or drywall compound in here. This is the type that comes in the box or the bucket. It's pretty thick when you pull it right out of the bucket, and I don't want it that thick. I want to mix this down. When you do your third coat, you're doing about a mayonnaise-like consistency when you do this. This is even runnier than that. It's not quite really runny, but it's pretty pliable in there. And then what I'm going to do is take a brush and I'm going to use this brush this is a regular paint brush. And like I said, this is a very, very faint texture here. So I'm going to take my old paintbrush and I'm just going to dab it in there really lightly. And I'm going to go along here and just tap this in very gently, not heavy, because I have a very light texture here. Now, if you have a heavy orange peel, you can do something different. You can put this on thicker. You can daub it on with your trowel or your drywall knife, and you can blend it in that way. But like I said, this is just, I had to experiment a little bit because this is such a thin, very light texture. I didn't want to overdo it. So you can tell I'm not putting much on there at all. And I'm starting with the patch itself. Okay, so there's just not much happening here. And I'm going to let this dry. If I don't like what I've done, I can just take some water, wet this, and scrape it right off and start all over again. That's a beautiful thing about drywall. mud is that it is very easy to work with. Now, I've got the majority of the patch itself covered. So what I want to do after that is simply blend it out into the field. And I'm going to just, as I go out, I'm going to get lighter and lighter and lighter as I go out. And I don't want to just make a circle or a spiral because you'll be able to see that. So I'm just randomly going to texture out into the field here. And this is going to help hide the total space of the patch. Okay, so I'm happy with the way this looks. And right now this looks kind of spotty. But you got to remember, you're going to primer it and then you're going to repaint it. But before I do that, I'm going to let that dry completely. And in this case, I'm not going to use my knockdown knife to knock it down. I want it to stay just like this. And then I'm going to use a wet sponge to wipe it off after it's dry. Not completely, just to soften the peaks and the valleys and to smooth out the edges. That your drywall knife's going to make sharp, hard edges. If you're doing what I normally call orange peel, that would be perfectly fine. But because I have such a subtle, soft texture here, I need to smooth it off. Okay, our project house is nearing completion. So what I wanted to show you is the finished product here. When we last were talking, we were putting the wet sanding on here. We've let that dry. Then we primered the entire wall surface and then painted it with a quality paint. This wall patch is really hard to find, and you really have to know it's even here to even look for it. I'm pleased with how this turned out. If you have other home improvement projects that you're interested in, check out maintenanceminute.net. I'm Jim Vbrock. Thanks for watching.
Are you interested in woodworking or home repair? If so, please look at maintenanceminute.net. Hi, I'm Jim Vbrock, and I'm the host of Maintenance Minute. From my website, you can watch videos on how to build a variety of arts and crafts projects, full-on woodworking builds, and home repair and remodeling tips, too. We recently added an archive section where you can see over 40 years of projects that I have built. Please take a moment and visit maintenanceminute.net.